Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with Unleash You. Today, we're going to be looking at something that's pretty interesting, and that's the idea of relationship readiness. We're diving into this article called 17 Signs You're Not Ready for a Relationship and Why That's Okay.
Okay.
And I think it's a really fascinating topic because, we often talk about, how to find a relationship or, what to do in a relationship.
Right.
But we don't really often talk about like, hey, are you even ready to be in a relationship?
Yeah, are you in the right headspace to even start one?
Exactly. So I'm really excited to kind of dig into this with you and just get your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are your like initial thoughts when you hear the phrase like relationship readiness? What comes to mind for you?
Well, I think it's about self-awareness more than anything else. It's knowing yourself, really knowing like what your needs are and what your baggage is before you invite someone else into that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like knowing what you're bringing to the table, I guess,
Exactly.
before you even, set the table.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's dive into some of these signs that the article talks about. One that really kind of jumped out at me was lingering past trauma. And I think that's something that a lot of people kind of try to sweep under the rug.
Yeah. It's tempting to think we can just move on and, pretend it didn't happen, but that's not really how it works.
Right.
Unresolved trauma can really impact your relationships in a lot of ways, and I think it's really important to acknowledge that and to address it before you try to build something new with someone else.
Yeah, so it's not just about avoiding romantic relationships altogether. It's about acknowledging that your past might be affecting, your present relationships in ways that you might not even realize.
Absolutely. This article talks about how past trauma can affect your ability to trust your ability to be vulnerable and even how you interpret your partner's actions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it can lead to a lot of self-sabotage without even realizing it.
That's a really powerful insight, I think. It's like you're bringing this, this whole box of, unresolved issues into a brand new space and expecting, everything to just magically work itself out.
Right, and relationships are already complicated enough without that extra baggage.
Exactly. And it's not always the, kind of the big traumatic events either. Sometimes it's these smaller things that
Mhm.
we kind of accumulate over time that we haven't really processed.
Right, the little hurts and disappointments that we carry with us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about past trauma. This article also talks about, things that aren't so, heavy and serious. One of the things it mentions is enjoying independence.
Oh.
Could that actually be like a red flag when it comes to relationships?
Not necessarily red flag, but it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
There's a difference between enjoying your own company and being afraid to share your life with someone.
So how do you know if you're, truly ready to kind of share your life? Because I think a little bit of hesitation is normal,
Mm.
right?
Sure, hesitation is normal, but you need to ask yourself what you're hesitant about. Are you hesitant about having to compromise or consider someone else's needs, or maybe losing some of your freedom?
Right. So it's about figuring out, what you're truly looking for and what you're comfortable with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if the answer is you know that you're not ready to share certain parts of your life, then that's okay. It just means you might need more time to explore on your own before bringing someone else in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's another one that really resonated with me. Uncertainty about phallings.
Okay.
Because I think that's pretty normal, right?
Yeah.
Especially in the early stages of dating.
Of course, you're not going to know right away if someone is the one for you. It takes time to get to know someone and to figure out how you truly feel.
So this idea of like, needing to have those fireworks or that instant connection
Right.
right from the start is that kind of a misleading idea?
Yeah, I think so. The article talks about how clinging to that fairy tale notion can actually be detrimental because it can prevent you from seeing the potential in someone who might not initially sweep you off your feet.
Right. So it's about being open to the possibility that
Exactly.
those feelings might develop
Absolutely.
over time.
Yeah, and it's about being honest with yourself and with the other person about where you are emotionally.
Okay. So uncertainty about feelings, not necessarily a bad thing.
Not at all.
What about fear of vulnerability? I mean, that's got to be like part of any relationship, right?
It is a part of any relationship, but there's a balance. If the fear is so intense that it prevents you from opening up at all, then that's a problem.
So it's not about like being fearless. It's about recognizing that vulnerability is a necessary part of connecting with another person.
Exactly. And the article talks about how this fear can manifest in different ways, like building walls, avoiding difficult conversations, or even sabotaging the relationship before it has a chance to really start.
So it's almost like you're so afraid of getting hurt that you end up hurting yourself
Right.
and potentially the other
Mhm.
person in the process.
Exactly.
So it sounds like self-awareness is really a key theme here.
It's absolutely essential.
Okay, so we've got past trauma, uncertainty about feelings, fear of vulnerability. Let's talk about another one, prioritizing personal goals. Is that just a nice way of saying, I'm not interested?
Not at all. Sometimes our personal goals, whether it's advancing your career, pursuing a passion, or traveling the world, they just take priority, and that's perfectly fine.
Right, so it's not about closing the door on love forever. It's about recognizing that, a relationship might not be the right fit for your life right now.
Exactly.
You might be super focused on building your business
Right.
or, writing a book or, whatever it is that's, really important to you. And that's amazing.
Absolutely.
But it might also mean that, a romantic relationship just isn't the right fit at this moment.
Right. And being honest about that with yourself and potential partners is so important.
It's refreshing to hear that it's okay to put yourself first sometimes
I agree.
because I think we're so bombarded with these messages about, finding the one. But we don't often talk about the importance of, becoming the best versions of ourselves first.
Right. You can't pour from an empty cup, as they say.
That's such a good analogy.
Huh.
And this article really emphasizes that point about self-discovery.
It does.
So why is self-discovery so important when it comes to relationship readiness?
Because it's not just about finding someone who checks all the boxes on your list. It's about becoming someone who is comfortable and confident in their own skin and
Yeah.
someone who can bring their whole authentic self to a relationship.
Yeah, and I think that's when you can really start to attract the right people into your life.
Absolutely.
So how does someone actually figure out, if they are ready for a relationship? Because it seems like it's more than just, swiping on an app and hoping for the best.
Right. The article suggests starting with some honest self-reflection, asking yourself some tough questions like, what are my relationship patterns? What are my needs and expectations? What are my absolute deal breakers?
Wow, those are some tough questions. But they're really important ones to ask, right?
Absolutely. It's about getting real with yourself and figuring out what you truly want and need in a partner and in a relationship.
And it's not just about, the kind of superficial stuff either, right? It's about your values,
Yeah.
your goals, your vision for the future.
Right. Are you looking for something casual or committed? Do your life plans align with the kind of relationship you envision?
If you are thinking to start a new relationship,
Yeah.
we've actually linked a relationship readiness quiz in the description below.
Oh, that's great.
You can go ahead and take that after you listen to this episode.
I love that.
Yeah, so go ahead and check that out. But it really is about laying that strong foundation before you even start building the house right.
Exactly. It might take more time and effort up front, but it leads to a much stronger and more stable relationship in the end.
And isn't that what we all want?
Absolutely.
A strong and stable relationship that can, withstand the test of time.
Exactly.
So it sounds like relationship readiness isn't just about, checking off a list of qualities. It's about building that solid foundation of self-awareness, emotional maturity, and a genuine desire to, share your life with another person.
That's a great way to put it.
And speaking of foundations, let's talk about communication because I think that's another really crucial piece of this puzzle.
Absolutely. Communication is key in any relationship, but it's especially important when you're trying to figure out if you're ready for one in the first place.
So what does this article have to say about communication in the context of relationship readiness?
It emphasizes that being ready for a relationship also means being a good communicator, being able to express your needs and expectations, clearly being a good listener, and navigating disagreements constructively.
So it's not just about talking, it's about truly understanding and being understood.
Exactly. And the article even suggests that if you find yourself struggling to communicate effectively in other areas of your life, that might be a sign that you need to work on those skills before jumping into a romantic relationship.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's like expecting to run a marathon without ever having trained for it.
Right, you got to build up those muscles.
Exactly. Communication is a muscle that needs to be exercised and strengthened. And the payoff is huge. When you're able to communicate openly and honestly with your partner, it builds trust, intimacy, and a deeper connection, which ultimately leads to a more fulfilling and satisfying relationship.
And speaking of fulfillment, let's circle back to something we talked about earlier, the fear of getting hurt. Because putting your heart out there is always a risk.
Yeah.
But how do you balance that fear with the desire for connection?
That's a great question, and it's something that so many people struggle with. The article acknowledges that vulnerability is scary, but it also emphasizes that it's an essential ingredient for true intimacy. You can't have one without the other.
It's like wanting to swim in the ocean, but you're terrified of getting wet.
Exactly.
You can't experience the joy of one without embracing the other. So
Yeah.
what's the solution? How do you kind of dive in without being completely consumed by fear?
The article suggests taking a gradual approach, starting small.
Yeah.
It's about dipping your toes in the water before taking the plunge. Maybe it's sharing something slightly more personal with a friend or family member, or practicing setting boundaries in a less emotionally charged situation. The key is to build your confidence and comfort level gradually.
So baby steps.
Mm.
It's about building your resilience and realizing that the more you practice vulnerability, the more comfortable you become.
And the more you open yourself up to the possibility of those really deep and meaningful connections.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I'm starting to see that being ready for a relationship isn't just about finding the one. It's about becoming the right person for yourself first.
I'm so glad to hear that. And that's precisely the kind of shift this article encourages. It's about empowering each of us to take ownership of our own relationship readiness instead of waiting for someone else to complete us.
So before we move on to part 2, I want to leave our listeners with this. What's one thing you're going to focus on to build your own relationship readiness and make sure to follow?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Unleash. You to unleash the best within.
And stay tuned for part 2, where we'll explore even more signs of relationship readiness and what to do about them.
Welcome back. We were just talking about some really important aspects of relationship readiness, like dealing with past trauma and facing that fear of vulnerability and that whole idea of, really focusing on self-discovery.
Yeah, it's amazing how much we tend to, just kind of gloss over those really fundamental things when we're so focused on the dating game and all of that. Right, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of it all.
Exactly.
But taking the time to address those deeper layers is so important.
Yeah, it's like building a house on solid ground. You need that firm foundation to withstand anything that comes your way.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious about some of the signs that this article mentions that, maybe people wouldn't even realize are red flags when it comes to relationship readiness.
Okay.
What are some things that, might be surprising to people?
Well, one that really stands out is ambivalence about commitment.
Okay, so commitment, isn't that the whole point of a relationship?
Right, it would seem that way, but it's not always as simple as it sounds.
How could someone not be? That's a deal breaker, right?
Yeah, it's not always about not wanting commitment. It's often about underlying fears or insecurities that are holding you back.
Interesting. So what are some of those deeper fears that might be, kind of disguised as ambivalence towards commitment?
The article mentions things like the fear of losing your independence, or the fear of making the wrong choice, or even past experiences where commitment led to pain or disappointment.
Right. So it's like, those relationship horror stories that we all hear.
Exactly.
They can really stick with you.
They can plant those seeds of doubt for sure.
So it's not necessarily that you don't want to be in a relationship. It's that you might have these deeper fears that are preventing you from fully embracing it.
Right, and it's worth exploring those feelings further. Asking yourself what's at the root of that hesitation. Is it a valid concern, or is it something from the past that's holding you back?
That's a really good question to ask yourself, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so ambivalence about commitment.
Yeah.
What else? What other surprising signs does this article talk about?
Another one is the desire for freedom.
Wait, so wanting freedom, is that like a bad thing if you want to be in a relationship?
Not necessarily. It's about finding a relationship style that honors that need for freedom. It might mean finding a partner who shares that love of independence, or it might involve setting clear boundaries within the relationship so that both people feel respected and fulfilled.
I've always wondered about those couples who seem like they're, attached at the hip. Do they ever want some space?
Well, everyone needs a little space sometimes, right? And that's why open communication is so crucial. If you're not comfortable expressing your need for freedom, it can lead to resentment down the line.
Absolutely. It's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
Exactly.
It's not going to work.
Something's got to give.
Okay, so we've got ambivalence towards commitment and this desire for freedom. What else? What other kind of counterintuitive signs does this article bring up?
This one might resonate with a lot of people. Recent breakup.
Okay. I mean, that seems pretty straightforward. You just got out of a relationship. You're probably not ready to jump into a new one.
Right. But this article goes deeper than that. It's not just about avoiding rebounds. It's about giving yourself time to heal and process the experience.
Oh, I see. So it's like, trying to paint over a crack in the wall without actually fixing it first.
Exactly. Rushing into a new relationship before you've fully dealt with the previous one can lead to repeating unhealthy patterns or carrying baggage into the new relationship.
Right. You're not really giving yourself the chance to start fresh.
And you're not giving the new relationship a fair chance either.
Yeah. So it's about being kind to yourself and honoring your own healing process.
Exactly. You deserve to be in a relationship where you can show up as your whole healed self, not a patchwork of past hurts.
That's such a powerful message, I think, for anyone going through a breakup.
I agree.
Okay, so recent breakup, another one to keep in mind. And this article also mentions low self-esteem.
Yes, that's an important one.
How does that play into relationship readiness?
Well, when you don't value yourself, it can be hard to believe that you deserve love and respect from someone else.
It's like that saying, we accept the love we think we deserve.
Exactly. If you don't believe you're worthy of love, you might unconsciously attract partners who reinforce that belief.
So it can really affect the types of relationships that you end up in.
Absolutely. Low self-esteem can lead to settling for less than you deserve, or seeking validation from external sources, or even sabotaging relationships because you don't believe you're capable of happiness.
So it's not just about finding the right partner, it's about becoming the right partner for yourself first.
That's a great way to put it. This article emphasizes the importance of working on your self-esteem as a crucial step towards building healthy relationships. It's about recognizing your inherent worth, embracing your strengths, and challenging those negative self-talk patterns that can hold you back.
So this is really making me rethink a lot of things.
Yeah.
I used to think that being ready for a relationship was all about, finding the one. But now I'm seeing that it's so much more about becoming the one for yourself first.
I love that. And that's exactly the kind of shift in thinking this article encourages. It's about empowering you to take ownership of your own relationship readiness instead of waiting for someone else to complete you.
All right, so we've covered some pretty heavy topics here. Low self-esteem breakups, all of that.
Yeah.
Let's lighten things up a bit.
Okay.
What about some of the signs that are a little bit more fun?
Well, this one might surprise you. The desire for casual dating.
Wait, so wanting to keep things casual, is that a bad thing?
Not at all. There's nothing wrong with enjoying the casual dating scene as long as you're honest with yourself and your partners about your intentions.
Right, so the problem comes in when there's a mismatch in expectation.
Exactly. Like when one person is looking for a relationship and the other's just looking for a good time.
Right. That can lead to a lot of hurt feelings.
It can, and that's why open communication is so important. If you're not looking for a relationship, be honest about it. And if you're hoping for something more serious, don't be afraid to communicate that too.
It's so empowering to realize that we have a choice in how we approach dating and relationships.
Yeah,
We don't have to follow a script or conform to societal expectations.
I agree.
What matters most is being true to ourselves and what we want.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another sign the article mentions that really ties in with that idea of personal choice. Personal goals, taking priority.
Okay, tell me more about how personal goals can affect relationship readiness.
Sometimes our ambitions, whether it's a career change, furthering our education, traveling the world, or just focusing on personal growth, they just take center stage.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
It's like those different seasons of life,
Ain't
right?
it they?
There's a time for focusing on your career, a time for exploring the world, and a time for nurturing a romantic relationship. And each one is equally valuable and important.
I love that analogy. It really captures the fluidity and individuality of our life journeys.
What matters most is that we're present in each season and making choices that feel authentic to us.
Absolutely.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. It's clear that, relationship readiness is not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing,
It's not a destination, it's a journey, and everyone's journey is going to look a little different.
and there's no right or wrong timeline either. It's so easy to compare ourselves to others and feel like we're falling behind.
Yeah,
But we all have our own path.
exactly. The most important thing is to be honest with ourselves about where we're at and to approach this journey with compassion and a willingness to learn and grow.
So before we move on to the final part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to reiterate a point that this article mentions again and again: communication.
Yes. Communication is key.
No matter what stage of relationship readiness you're in, open and honest communication is so important.
It really is. It's the foundation of any healthy relationship.
It's like they say, assumptions are the termites of relationships.
Ooh, I like that.
Communicate, communicate, communicate.
That's it.
It can really make all the difference.
It can.
So before we move on to part 3, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. What's one area of communication that you want to work on in your own life? It could be expressing your needs more clearly, becoming a better listener, or even just setting aside dedicated time for those meaningful conversations.
That's a great challenge for our listeners to ponder.
And remember, if you're curious about your own journey towards healthy and fulfilling relationships, we have that relationship readiness quiz linked in the episode description. Go check it out after you finish listening. It's a fun and insightful way to learn more about yourself.
And be sure to follow Unleash You to unleash the best within.
All right, welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into relationship readiness. You know, this whole conversation has really got me thinking about how much I used to think finding a partner was all about, like, finding the missing piece of the puzzle.
Right.
But it's so much more than that.
It's not about fitting pieces together. It's about creating a space where two individuals can come together and actually, thrive and grow together.
I love that.
Yeah.
So for this final part, what's the last sign of relationship readiness that we need to kind of unpack?
This one can be tough to face, but it's so important. Lack of emotional availability.
Ooh, it does sound kind of intense.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly does it mean to be emotionally unavailable?
Well, the article talks about it as the ability or inability to be truly present in a relationship, both emotionally and mentally. It's about being open to sharing your feelings, being receptive to your partner's emotions, and having the capacity to really connect on a deeper level.
So it's not just about, like, physically showing up. It's about showing up with your whole heart.
Exactly.
And if someone is lacking that emotional availability, how does that actually show up in a relationship?
It can manifest in a lot of ways. They might have trouble expressing their feelings, avoid intimacy, or push people away to protect themselves from getting hurt.
It's almost like they're there, but not really there.
Right.
Like you're trying to have a conversation with someone who's constantly checking their phone.
Yeah, you're not getting their full attention.
It just creates this sense of, like, disconnection.
Exactly. There's a lack of genuine engagement.
So what causes that lack of emotional availability? Is it like a personality trait, or is it something that happens over time?
It can stem from a lot of different factors, like past trauma, unresolved emotional baggage, or even just a deep fear of intimacy. It could also be a sign that someone is still healing from a previous relationship or simply not ready for a new one.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's more like a protective mechanism.
Right. It's like putting on armor to avoid getting hurt.
And I guess that's why it's so important to approach this topic with, empathy and understanding.
Absolutely.
If you're noticing signs of emotional unavailability, either in yourself or in a partner, address it with compassion and a willingness to work through those deeper issues.
Exactly. It's not about blaming or judging. It's about understanding and supporting each other.
It's interesting how all of these signs we've talked about are kind of interconnected.
They are.
Like if you're struggling with low self-esteem, that might make you less emotionally available because you're afraid of rejection.
Right.
Or if you're still holding on to past trauma, it can create all these barriers to vulnerability and intimacy.
Exactly. It all ties together.
That's like a domino effect.
Yeah, it highlights how important it is to look at relationship readiness holistically. It's not about isolating one issue. It's about seeing how all the pieces fit together.
Yeah, like a tapestry.
Exactly. And if one thread is loose, it can affect the whole picture.
Wow, this whole deep dive has really been eye-opening for me.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's made me realize that relationship readiness isn't like a finish line. It's more like this ongoing journey of self-discovery and growth and healing.
Absolutely. And it's a journey we're all on, whether we're single, dating, or in a committed relationship.
And there's no right or wrong way to do it.
Exactly.
The most important thing is to be honest with ourselves about where we're at and to approach it all with compassion and a willingness to learn.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So as we wrap up this episode, I want to leave our listeners with this question. What's one action step you can take today based on what we've talked about? Maybe it's starting a journal to process your feelings, setting a boundary in a current relationship, or even just having an honest conversation with yourself about what you truly want.
That's a great place to start.
Remember, this is just the beginning. The real work begins when we take all of this knowledge and start applying it to our own lives.
Absolutely.
And if you're ready to explore your own relationship readiness journey, we have that quiz linked in the episode description. Go check it out. It's a really great tool for sparking self-awareness and getting you on the right path.
And remember to be patient with yourself. There's no rush. Take your time and enjoy the journey.
That's such great advice. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into relationship readiness. And don't forget to follow Unleash You to unleash the best within.